Break with Reality, Part 12. Keir and Lori reclined huddled in the cramped bunk in the cabin, enjoying post-coital fags, even though Keir didn't normally smoke, basking in the heated glow of satisfying sex. They've been alternating between shagging and napping for a few hours now, discovering odd contentment in each other's company. "Well, you certainly know what you're doing," said Lori, inhaling. The tip of the cigarette glowed, and she allowed the undrawn smoke to escape from smeared lips, only to be captured in the vacuum of neat powdered nostrils. "Aye, well, I get a job when I need some cash, live a frugal life, couple of pints here and there." "No," laughed Lori, elbowing her bedmate. "I mean like what we just did, the sex and that." "The sex and that?" repeated Keir, frowning. "I thought I just did the same as everybody." "Oh no, believe me, the majority of men do not know what they're doing. You can't like how to treat a woman properly." "I didn't think I had that big a cock," said Keir, puzzled. "No, you haven't. Well, no, you have. No, well, it's a decent size. But as the old saying goes, it's what we do with it. Stamina as well. Is that the SAS training Dougal said you'd done?" "SAS training? Oh, well, there wasn't much sex involved there, I can tell you." Lori noticed a certain discomfort come over Keir on being questioned about this part of his former life. "I just do what feels right for me and for you as well, of course," he said, relieved at managing to swing the conversation back. "Well, that makes all the difference. You thought of me. Why did you bother? I'm just a cheap, a free tart, a whore you'll never see again." "Dinna say that about yourself, Lori," said Keir, sounding more serious than Lori had heard since she met him. "You're a warm, sensual, passionate, intelligent woman, and I'd never treat someone with you with anything else but respect. Fuck me, you're even a good laugh." Lori studied Keir's profile, trying to determine how sincere he was being. He slowly turned his head towards her, the twinkle of his pale blue eyes fixing on hers, laser beams probing deep within, seeking, finding and somehow unlocking the gateway to her soul. "Ah, right," said Lori, smile blossoming. A last brief draw and the fag was extinguished alongside Keir's in an ashtray on top of the duvet, which she lifted and placed on the shelf by the bunk. "I think you need to tell me more." She opened the covers and shifted her body so she was able to bend down and place a kiss or two on Keir's rapidly recovering manhood. "Well, you're also a hoorin' good..." The rest of Keir's words drifted away as Lori plied her trade under the bedclothes. For Lori, this wasn't just a freebie now. This felt different. She wasn't sure what, but it meant something more. When Dougal awoke, it was with a jolt, and the sound that assaulted his ears was akin to a chainsaw starting up. The sight that met his gluey eyes was one of near darkness. How long had he been asleep? He peered around, attempting to make out various objects in the room in order to discern what was making that bloody terrible racket. "How the fuck did he get here?" he murmured, blurry eyes eventually barely focusing on Rocco, asleep sitting on the other side of the mess room, chin and chest but mouth wide open, snoring with a power hitherto unknown to mankind. This was a championship performance. His bladder took that moment to alert him to the fact that he was bursting for a piss, so Dougal decided to get up and search out the nearest toilet. On walking across the mess room, he noticed with vague apprehension that the ship seemed to be heaving more than it had before. He found his way to the toilet, adjacent to the mess, offloaded 17 litres of urine and washed his hands. He reached into his jacket pocket to retrieve his phone in order to see what time it was. The mobile wasn't there. Guessing it must have fallen out on the sofa he'd been sleeping on, he headed back to the mess room to have a look for it. Crossing the passageway, it slowly became apparent to Dougal that the movement of the boat he'd noticed earlier was not one he would associate with a vessel at the harbour side. Back in the mess room, he strode over to the nearest window and looked out. Through the darkness he could see lights. It was Aberdeen right enough, but from a totally different perspective to the one he'd been accustomed to, and too far away for his liking. With a lurching sense of alarm building in his chest, he ran over and searched for his phone under and around the sofa he'd been sleeping on. The sigh of relief on seeing it turned to one of despair when he picked the gadget up and saw it had been smashed in. By what he guessed might have been the heel of a boot. He stood scratching his head. Gustav said the ship wasn't sailing till Monday. Was that how long he'd been sleeping? Surely no. Where was everybody else? Only he and Rocco. Dougal suddenly realised the snoring noise had ceased and Rocco wasn't where he'd been moments before. How did he do that? It was time to find Keir. Where could he be? Dougal replayed the image of Lori's arse being slapped by his friend as they headed to her boudoir in his mind. He raced across the mess room, knowing exactly where they'd be. Keir! Dougal whispered as loudly as he could as he burst into Lori's cabin of lust. What the fuck? Keir, wearing Lori's bra in a kneeling straddled position above her, precariously attempting some weird sex manoeuvre, turned with a start at the interruption. He lost his balance, rolled off the bunk and fell onto the floor. Oh, you fucker! Dougal, shouted Lori, pouting and showing no attempt at covering her ample breasts. I was just getting to the good bit. Dougal stared at her, mesmerised for a second, mouthing silent words, then shook himself back into concentration and turned back to the naked Keir, struggling to get up off the floor. Keir, there's something just near right about all this, Dougal said, trying hard to avert his gaze as he helped his friend to his feet. Look, put your pants on, would you? He grimaced. I can't think straight with that swinging about. What do you mean? Hey, we're fairly moving a bit here. Keir trailed off, becoming aware himself of the rocking motion he had noticed when he'd been preoccupied in the bunk. The fuck's happening? He reached for his underpants, plucking them from a wall light they'd been hanging on above a desk, and pulled them on. Keir, I've just been woken by the Richter scale of that Scarlet Pimpernel Rocco snoring through air, and I think we're at sea. Oh, for fuck's sake, said Keir, rolling his eyes. You got your phone on you? Keir located his jacket on the floor, stuck his hand first in the usual pocket, and then every other pocket he had. No phone. What about you? Dougal asked Lori. Try my bag, she said, indicating the small leather satchel on the table. Dougal picked it up and tossed it over to her. Something about searching a woman's handbag didn't sit well with him. He had no idea what was kept in those things and he wasn't keen on finding out. Here it is, said Lori, pulling out her mobile. Dougal's face lit up. But no, she pushed some buttons to no effect. No battery. Three of them stared at each other for a moment, and in the lull, the distant sound of raised voices could be heard from somewhere else in the boat. Who's... started Lori. Shh, said Dougal. He crept over to the door and opened it as quietly as he was able to. Lori was now out of the bunk as well, desperately searching for knickers and other clothing that had been previously cast to all four corners of the cabin. Raising a hand to signal that they stay silent, Dougal stuck his head ear first out of the door. The voices were indistinct but getting louder, not because they were getting nearer, more to do with the fact that the argument seemed to be heating up. What are they? Started Keir. Shh, repeated Dougal, struggling to listen. Can't it? I think one of them's Johan, nae sure. They're arguing in, I think, another language. Are they on the next floor? Asked Lori. Nah, sounds like they're maybe a couple of decks up, said Dougal. The volume of the argument rose until one of the pair released a roar, a lion would have been proud of, whilst at the same time the other person produced a blood-curdling scream that sent spears of lightning down the spines of all three in the cabin. The voices then dropped abruptly into silence. Dougal let the door close gently and turned to stare at the other two, wide-eyed, open-mouthed. He could feel a terror rising from the depths of his stomach that he was struggling to suppress. 3 pairs of eyes darted to the ceiling then as the main lights went out, leaving the ship in the illumination of the emergency circuits. These dim lamps were designed to allow you to reach the nearest emergency exit, no more, no less. Oh, I didn't like the sound of that, Keir whispered. And why have the lights gone out? I don't know, said Dougal. We better go and see what it was, should we? Someone might need help. Aye, you're right, said Keir. He turned to Lori. You stay here in case fuck all, said an indignant Lori. You're not leaving me here, I can tell you. But if there's trouble, said Keir, I don't want you to... Keir, interrupted Dougal. Lori is just as, if nae mair than, capable of handling this shit than we are. He nodded over to the doorway. Come on. we can all go.